favorite presidents. I am a jelly donut.
Good one, right?
Excellent. Yes.
Well, I had to somehow connect the current situation in the States, so
It's perfect. It says it all right there.
yeah, I will not go further, but just
That says it. That's enough right there.
it sums it up, kind of.
It does. It really does.
Anyway, Brad, I'm really happy that you are willing to do it and to talk a little. And you've been one of my musical influences and heroes since I was 18. I had my first ethno jazz band when I was 18,
Yeah.
and the only ethno records you could get here were like Pachora and Babkas. Actually, not the Bulgarian stuff, original. And Ferus Mustafa, I got that, but. So I learned so much from just listening you playing all this stuff with all these guys, and that's why I'm really happy to talk a little about this. So, and
yeah, well, that music is kind of all around you, right? Where you live.
Yeah. So it's quite cool that you're doing this as well. I mean, I'll ask you about that. How come you started doing this? But I just want to go first a little bit back, like. You grew up on the West Coast, right? Near Seattle.
Yeah, in Seattle. Yeah.
And how was the scene there when you grew up? Because I was never in Seattle. I was always in New York or the East Coast, and always Seattle is considered as this dreamland place of music and of life. And how come? I mean, how did this influence you, let's say, in the beginning, or?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I have a theory that the public school music education, the fact that they provided, some music programs in the public schools really has a plays a big part in why there's so many musicians that came from Seattle, maybe, or, and that was definitely my case. We had public school music, and I started on the saxophone as a grade schooler. And my dad played a little guitar, so it looked fun. So I wanted to be a part of it, and it kept going. It just kept rolling. I was interested in it, and I think that's, if you talk to a lot of people who maybe are my age or after that, like Andrew D'Angelo and Jim Black and Chris Speed and
all you guys came from Seattle, right?
Kung Fu. Yeah, we were kind of playing around. I met those guys, in my later teens, when I was in high school, and we played together and had fun,
Yeah, and did that grunge scene also influence you in a way, or?
It's funny. Not so much. I did play with Matt Cameron once on some kind of gig, and he's a great drummer. But unfortunately, I didn't really tap into that. One of my roommates was a drummer in that scene. Later, he was in Candlebox. But yeah, it kind of parallel universe. Like some of those venues, I was just looking the other day. I had a tape from like 1988, and Nirvana was playing in the same venue, but I was not hip enough to check them out, So.
Also, you never saw them live, like all these bands, Pearl Jam or stuff, or?
No, I had friends that were sort of more in tune with that stuff, and but no, I never saw those guys. Yeah, and they weren't stars. By the time I left, I left in 1990. Yeah, that's when they were kind of starting to break. It's like 1990. But yeah.
Do you remember like some of the concerts you saw in Seattle, like your first jazz concerts that you saw that kind of made you do like, okay, I want to be a jazz guitarist or a jazz musician?
I mean, I don't know if jazz was really, it's just music. I just was fascinated and interested and gravitated to music and sports as a kid, just guitar and playing music, writing music. And but I went to the Port Townsend Festival as a young teenager, like maybe as a 13 or 14-year-old, and that made a big impression on me. They had the giants, Johnny Griffin, Cedar Walton, Ray Brown was there, Milt Jackson, Mickey Roker, that that quartet, and then the local West Coast guys, from Seattle, like who became my teachers, like Jim Knapp, Jake Layton, Julian Priester. They were all up there at this camp too, and my guitar teacher Dave Peterson, so that was a really formative experience. And at that time I was playing saxophone and and guitar, both. I was kind of both on those,
And but you remember like which record or something, like an album made you like? For me it was, for instance, like some of the first records I've heard were Pat Metheny, The Road to You, when I was 14, that live record, and it just changed. I was like, damn, I want to learn this. I want to see what's happening. Do you have some experience like that about some records that you heard, like from jazz?
I would say like the big one was like this record called, it was just a song, Back of Town Blues by Louis Armstrong, and it was a later recording, and I just liked the fact that it was a story and it was the blues and I could hear it, and I think I was probably like, I was young. I was like maybe 11 or something.
Oh, wow.
And I liked that. And then, from there, I was always going to the library, and I had a paper route, sell papers and get money every month. And I used to go to the record stores, one town over, take the bus and buy records. And I would just take records out from the library. And I remember making cassettes of, Charlie Parker and Giant Steps and all these albums and Miles Davis greatest hits, and just kind of checking that stuff out as a young teenager. It was interesting to me, and as well as blues and Van Halen, and I was involved in garage bands, and we did little blues parties. Play like Blues Brothers type of material. That's how the Blues Brothers kind of introduced me to a lot of those guys, like Willie Dixon. I had no idea who that was,
Yes, that's amazing. But did you then, I mean, your style, when I listen to you, it's so fluid, right? It reminds me sometimes of horn players, because it's like this endless flow it has. I mean, if you play jazz, or even if you play ethno, even more, I think ethno, world music, whatever we call this, right? But did you transcribe lots of horn players as well, or listen to horn players like you mentioned, Neil Parker? And
I didn't. I wouldn't say I transcribed a lot of stuff as a younger person. I think later I kind of wrote things down, but it was much more intuitive. But yes, always listening to horn players and different instruments, different kinds of music. I would take out albums that were just songs of Greece on the bouzouki. That was interesting to me, and wow, 9/8, and that was a revelation. All these different meters, and then Steve Coleman was talking about the Bulgarian women's choir. Wow, that sounds cool. So I want to check that out, and so listening to that stuff, and then I started to transcribe it, and maybe I was 18, 19, 20, that area, and I was writing music as well, and listening to Seeds of Time and all of that stuff.
Incredible.
That was interesting stuff, And
that's incredible stuff,
And but I never really thought of it in terms of a style. I'm much more aware and conscious of that now, and much more in tune with the fact that most of what I like about music comes from the African American tradition of music making, and where that all comes from. And so now I'm much more interested in the styles and getting deeper into players and the history of it. It kind of dovetails with my teaching as well.
Sure.
Because I teach a blues class at NYU, so it's called Chicago Blues, but it's the history really of blues and
cool.
And it's but I think what I like about the folk music is that it's similar to the blues in that it's not, the story is in the telling of it, and it changes every time, and it's not written down, and it's really this direct contact with other players that allows that to happen, you know.
But so you basically you learned this music on your own. You didn't have teachers, right? I mean,
Well, no, I did have teachers.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I did have some teachers, but in Seattle at that point, my teachers were more on the free jazz side of things, like Jerry Granelli, and Jay Clayton, and Julian Priester, and Jim Knapp, and so it wasn't really about bebop or any kind of history or lineage, you know. But I did transcribe things from that I heard on records and from the library. But when I moved to New York, I actually met people from the Rome community and started to really understand a little bit more about that. And I credit, you know, I think I wouldn't have any kind of connection to this music if I didn't know those people. If I hadn't spent time with those people, it just wouldn't have soaked in a little bit, because I really don't have this mental space to carry all these bags around with me, you know, in terms of style of music, and I'm just not that kind of person, you know. I know there are musicians that can really do that, and I really respect that. You know, they can, you know, whether it's memorizing a 15-minute piece and, you know, the dynamics and everything are perfect, and I don't know what kind of musician I am, but I'm not that kind of musician somehow. I'm more of a, anyway, I don't know. But yeah, playing with those people really allowed it to, I mean, I learned so much from playing.
Yeah, because you played like also on your records with Pachora and all these early bands, Babka's Paradox with Matt Dario. You played lots of traditional music, like from where basically near I live, like Bulgaria, Macedonia, and stuff like that. And for me, the only chance to learn that was like, you know, like I bought a CD by Faris Mustafa, the gypsy saxophone player, you know, and I wrote down all the melodies I could somehow figure out and then learn them, and listen to Milan Zavko, the accordion player, and stuff like that. So did you do that as well then? Like
absolutely, yeah. I still do that, you know. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we learned from each other. I think, like, I know Chris Speed was very prolific, with the transcribing and things like that, you know. And so I think at different times I wasn't really concerned with like learning the tradition, but you know, playing with Yuri Yunakov and playing with Seido, Salifoski, kind of, you know, Seido is more of, they're both really intuitive kind of players, so the education comes from doing it with them, and
playing,
and when we learned Yuri's music, it was, he wasn't able to tell me what chords or anything, or even at times there wasn't even a cassette to listen to of the music. You know, it wasn't like learn this tune. It was like go and learn it as he played it.
Yeah, well.
And so I remember lots of long rehearsals around the kitchen table with a bottle of Pepsi, and just you know, learning it. And he would say, "Yes, that's the right chord," or "No, you know, that's the wrong chord." And
that's almost the best, right?
Trial and error. I don't know. I mean, I was just lucky to have, you know, been in that place, you know, and be able to work with them. So that helped a lot. You know, I don't think I would have learned anything on my own that way.
Yeah, but you guys kind of made like a huge mini revolution when the Seattle guys, you came to New York basically like in the early 90s with this ethno influence, right? I mean, like it's like you and Chris Speed and I don't know, Jim Black, all you guys kind of started to push this Balkan odd rhythms also more to the forefront. Would you say that, or?
I mean, I don't know. I just it all kind of happened organically, so it wasn't any, you know, in the early days in New York, you know, there's a lot of free time, maybe, you
Yeah.
know, trying to make a living and pay your rent, and then spend the rest of the time just trying to improve and play with different people. And so the way it's worked out with me is, you know, there's always been some time, and we just kind of get together with different people, and things kind of just evolve, you know. And after a couple of years of playing with different people regularly, it's like these sessions, and people would write and bring stuff in. It's sort of, you know, they became groups that we played with. We decided to record, and like all of those groups were sort of around that. Bapcus and Tiny Bell Trio and Pachora and Paradox Trio, and a lot of them kind of played at the Tiny Bell Cafe.
Yeah.
Sorry, the cafe.
Yeah. So Tiny Bell kind of happened in the same idea, right? But you kind of then expanded more everything, I think, right?
Yeah, well, that's Dave's. It was all Dave's music and his idea and his thing. But it sort of grew out of a natural sessions and playing together.
Yeah, that was such a cool band. I mean, that's some of those tunes like I listened to the other day, Emma and Punchy and all those tunes that you guys played. You blend together so amazingly.
Yeah, Dave, you know,
three guys, incredible.
Yeah, we played a lot in those days. Every other week we would have or every week or every other week. I think it was, you know, Paradox Trio one week and then Tiny Bell the other week. So I was like playing in both groups. So, but yeah, Dave had an idea of what he wanted to do with that music. So.
Yeah.
And luckily, we got to do a lot of playing in the early 90s.
Yeah. So speaking of the early 90s, I wanted to ask you, like, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Paul Motian, right? I wanted to ask you, how did you get involved with Paul's, like playing in the electric bebop band? Like,
that's a really funny story because I had been in New York for like a year, and I remember it was on April Fool's Day, which is a practical joke day.
Yeah.
People play practical jokes, and out of the clear blue sky, you know, I answered the phone, and it was Paul Motian saying, you know, hey, do you want to play? I'm Paul Motian. Do you want to play? And it didn't have any connection to anything that I thought it was a joke, as you know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a joke. Actually, I think Bill Frisell he had heard me play in Seattle, and he had mentioned me. Somehow he got my number and called me, and that's how that started. So really fortunate, you know.
How was it like to play with him? I mean,
it was great. I didn't know anything about anything, you know. So I was extremely fortunate, and you know, you always want to go back and redo those things and like, you know, see what you can do again. But yeah, he was amazing. I learned the same thing. I learned a whole lot about music making from Paul and all the people that were in that band. You know?
Yeah, that's I mean, such a cool band. Like to hear you also with Ben Monder was on guitar, right? On that Flight of the Blue Jay, or Steve Cardenas, I think.
On the album,
yeah,
Kurt actually.
Oh, Kurt, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Kurt, but there was, I played with all of those guys in different. Maybe not Steve, but Ben definitely. In fact, there was a whole album that we did with Ben and me and Mark Elias that never got released. I don't know.
Really? Oh, yeah. Wow. Damn. Oh, that would be cool.
Part of the first session of the first album. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a shame. That would be amazing to hear.
Yeah.
But speaking of amazing drummers, I saw you in Maribor years ago with Joey Barron. I also wanted to ask you, how did you start playing with Joey then? Like,
that was a similar thing. I have no idea. My friends were playing with him, you know, Tony, Scherr, and I guess I knew Steve a little bit, and I don't know. I guess they maybe recommended me. I don't know. I actually don't know. I never asked them, but I guess that started around 2000.
Yeah,
and that was a big influence on me actually, because at that time, I wasn't. Just his approach to music was really different. It's totally.
It seems so much fun what he does, right? Like everything is.
Yeah.
Such a joyful thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but there's a lot going on underneath, and
Yeah, sure, of course.
It's not by accident.
Yeah.
Anything
Sure.
that he's doing is pretty great. So that's an inspiration, and still to this day, actually,
Yeah,
thinking
definitely.
about what he does. So yeah, and we got to play a lot with that group, so that was fun.
Yeah. How do you like playing with other guitarists also? Because you played like with Paul Motion, with other guitarists, and with Joey's group, with Steve. I mean, and you always seem to somehow, you and Steve find really nice space to avoid each other but complement each other. Like, how do you approach this playing, let's say?
I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of intuition, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think the conscious part of it really helps for
Yeah.
making music somehow. It's just approach it like intuitively and just play. But that said, I like the sound of guitars.
Yeah, sure.
And multiple guitars and yeah, Bass Desires. That album was the first one. It's really
That's
great.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
So
or that one, Schofield and Matini. I can see your house from here.
Yeah, that one too. Yeah.
That's quite cool. Also, really nice playing how they blend together, and Steve Swallow and Bill Stewart just like.
Yeah.
So cool. And speaking of drummers, I want to ask you this: like, how you talk that you play intuitive, but how do you choose musicians then? Also by intuition, because I know you played a lot with Tom Rainey and did like a couple of records with Tom, and he seems to be like this. I played with him also quite a lot and did some records, and he's one of the most intuitive drummers I know, but also like really versed to read music and stuff. So when you select musicians, do you also kind of go by this approach? Like, how did you select your trios with Scott Colley and Gary Versace, or how did you get musicians together?
Yeah, I think similar kind of intuition. Just feeling things out and seeing how people react with other people and what they like to do, and so. Yeah, Tony Scherr and Kenny Wollesen, those guys didn't know each other, and then we got together and started playing, and then so my first album had those guys on it.
Oh yeah, and then became Frizzell's rhythm section later as well, right?
Yeah, Sex Mob, all those guys.
Yeah, that's funny. That's quite cool.
So and Tom and Scott was really fun, and Tom Scott.
Yeah. No, those records with Scott and Tom, the Drip and what is it, Short Trip, those are so cool. That's like
they're not available. I'm gonna re-release those because they're not available actually. So.
Yeah, you should do that. They're really cool records.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have Short Trip on CD actually. So it's such a cool.
Yeah, record. You're one of the few. The label went under right after the second of those albums was released. So they actually, I think they actually destroyed a lot of their catalog of, the Knitting Factory Records label. They just destroyed all this back catalog. So it was kind of a pity because I would love to have those albums, the CDs, whatever. Yeah. That's the music business, I guess.
Sure, not easy. But I wanted to ask you also, like, if you select bands like by intuition, how do you compose then? Do you compose music especially for musicians? So would you compose like if you wrote for the trio with Scott and Tom? Did you write music specifically for that trio, having in mind that you have Scott and Tom, or do you write more like a genre?
I mean, those guys are so much better musicians than I am, so I don't worry about them because I just worry about what can I play, And you mentioned playing with other guitar players. We have this project that we've been doing for a few years now, actually, with Ben Monder and drummer Diego Boglino.
I saw you guys in New York in 2009 in this band. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what is Ben doing on a Fender bass? No,
Yeah.
in a place in where was it? In Brooklyn, someone where flippers
Yeah.
were in that room.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Pinball machines. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it wasn't 2009. It was maybe like 5 years ago or something.
5 years.
6 years ago.
Okay. Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
Anyway, we're still doing that. When it's been a minute since we've done it, but that band again. I don't really think about who's going to play the music. I just kind of think about, um, you know, I like to keep things kind of general and just have music be open in terms of how it could be played and yet have it be kind of a form, you
Yeah.
know, that we can all feel free in, and get comfortable in. So it's not. I don't really consider what the who the players are because it's just like it doesn't have to get that specific,
Hmm.
I feel like anybody can play it, you know.
So even if you did
If
like
I
that,
can play it, anybody can play it.
Come on.
but even when you did that record, that's such a good Human Activity Suite, like with all those guys, the quintet, you basically also wrote just music knowing that this was going to be quintet or with
Yes.
those players.
Yeah, that one was
That's
for
different,
specific
right?
time. Yeah, that was a little more different, and we had more pre-sections to let those guys, all
Yeah,
those guys play amazing solos. Gary
yeah, the band
Versace.
is amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so we did few gigs with that, and then that was fun. Yeah, been
Yeah.
trying to get that back together, but it hasn't been easy.
Yeah, those guys are super busy, probably, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a cool project. But one other question, like speaking of composition, you write a lot of odd meters, right, and irregular meters. How do you approach this stuff when soloing over that? Because like somehow, even if you're playing, I don't know, 13 or 7 or whatever, somehow you're floating over, but you land on one when it's necessary always, and seem to be know what you're doing. How do you how do you deal with playing over odd rhythms, let's say?
I mean, I just keep trying to work on it. Yeah, I have a long way to go, so I just keep working on it, listening to it, subdividing things.
Yeah,
And I think to really play on those things, really on anything, it's really the same as 4/4 maybe, where playing, because it's not about playing in a meter per se. It's like just playing and telling a story, So in that sense, I work on it all kinds of ways, from being just very intuitive, but also like counting things out
yeah.
and it's a work in progress, I guess.
But when you teach, I mean, you also teach this stuff, right, at the university. Like,
Yeah.
how would you teach a guitar player or horn player or whatever to play, let's say, a Vulcan's 11 or 9 rhythm, or how would you
Yeah.
make them comfortable? How do you do that?
Well, just in terms of the meter, you can always make a clave.
Yeah.
And just have that, groups of 2s and 3s.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the same as jazz music, I think the longer period of time that you can sort of hear, like I'm talking about, like maybe a few seconds, like if you can hear 4 measures or 8 measures of rhythm without tapping each individual thing, it just have it be organically phrased and all that, then it sounds better, So, if you can listen to larger chunks and just have that internalized and not really be counting, So I guess playing it, in the early days I would play with a looper, if it was something in 11. Maybe 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3,
Mm-hmm.
2, 2, 1, 2, 2, and then make it long,
just keep this
short, long, long, short, long, long, short, long, and then the very first step is to maybe play like a little line that goes da 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 da
Yeah,
da.
just
You know, but it's not
keep the
seven.
eights. Yeah.
Yeah, and just use a motive. And if you're playing, you know, like 2 or 3 note motive, then just try to take that through changes. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
whether it's some kind of tune.
Yeah.
Which by the way is why I think playing, you know, music from the jazz and African American tradition is really different than playing. It's like what they used to call world music, you know, because it's more modal, and nowadays you have all these parameters that you can play with, like harmony and meters and everything. So it's really rich, you know. It's really rich, and now there's so many possibilities with musicians of hearing different genres of music. We had this collaboration with Swaminathan Selva Ganesh, and he was the grandson of the original Shakti drummer, and it was amazing. And you know, to have him play with our group at NYU in the World Ensemble.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, I just, when I'm teaching, I try to break things down depending on what the level is, you know.
Yeah.
The student, but I don't really think there's a large difference in how you approach 7/8 or 11/8 to just playing 4/4, you know, or 6, whatever.
Yeah.
So
cool.
I think it's really personal. I don't know if there's a one size fits all kind of approach to that. But.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Yeah, like several doors, I guess, leading to that. I also wanted to touch this. Like, I was really happy when I saw the links that you sent me of the last records, the Believers one.
Oh yeah.
That you're dealing with Ralph Towner also, and that Water Wheel, like the 11/8 song. That's one of my favorite compositions he did with Jack and Eddie Gomez. And you studied composition with Ralph Towner?
I did, yeah.
Wow, how was that? When was that? I mean,
oh, that was amazing. He was just an incredibly generous, person. And you know, my lessons, I didn't know anything about anything, but I got this chance to study with him through a friend, and I would just bring in my compositions, and he would say, okay, yeah, you can do this, and then he would give me assignments like, okay, transcribe this standard, you know, because he's you know, big Bill Evans and all of that. So that's all in his music, as well as so many other things. So I was really great experience to be exposed to that. So that lasted for a few months, you know, and it did help a lot. You know, one of the things he talked about, you know, having 2 different ideas or 2 different sounds, and it's whatever you're doing, you know, you want to have something and then something that is different, you know, within a composition, whether it's 2 chords. And I've heard him talk about how, you know, like you can have 1 chord and then something else, another sound, and from there he can write the whole song. You know, it's amazing, of course. But that project, The Believers, kind of came about because of a tribute concert to Ralph that Joel Harrison organized, and he just organized a bunch of guitar players to play the music of Ralph, and it's a really interesting concert.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he had a bunch of really great guitar players, John Riley and Nels Klein, and Joel played, and great Vic Juris was amazing at that. He played the glide, and yeah. So, and Ralph was there for that too. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you ever play with him, like concert wise, or no, with Ralph?
No, I never did. No.
Yeah, that would be cool, right?
Yeah.
But, and
so I got those guys together for that concert, John Hadfield and Sam Minaie, who I had been playing with for years separately, and I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity, you know, because you know, to play with a trio playing Ralph's music, and then just get these 2 guys together and have them meet and play, and I thought it would be a really good combination. Turns out it is a good combination, and they love playing, and they're recording on different things together, so.
That's what I want to ask you, because you sound like a band, you guys. You know, that I listen to it. It sounds really like as if you played together a long time. That
Well,
the rec-
separately we have, but honestly, John and Sam had really not played that much, you know, and the record was done just as a session. Let's go do a session, and we'll you know, see what we can get out of it. And then we just liked it, so we decided to release it. You know?
Yeah, it sounds really cool. It sounds slightly different. I mean, I know you work a lot in trios, but this one has a slightly different vibe, I think, to it.
Yeah,
Like,
well, it's
yeah,
everybody's music. That's always
yeah,
helpful. It's Ralph's music, John Hadfield's music, and Sam.
yeah.
Sam has some tunes on there, and I have one tune on there. So now I'm writing music for the next one. So
You still write a lot of music, or
yeah,
otherwise?
I do. I have tons of unrecorded music. You know,
Yeah.
it's like yeah, I haven't been keeping up with recording it, but yeah, the project with Ben, we didn't record any of that music yet.
Ah, you should
So
do that. That would be so cool. Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
we will
Yeah.
one of
So,
these days.